everybody. So today's episode on the Scholar Voice podcast is a show and tell discussion. In this show and tell, we are going to explore ourselves and just explaining more about ourselves. My name is Alex.
My name is Addie.
My name is Eve.
And my name is Perry.
So today, just to start, basically the show and tell is just taking some items that really define you and your identity, and like things from your past that shape how you grew up and how you are today. So for my item, I have two. I'll only be showing one today, but I'll explain the other. This one is a little picture. It is from when I was about 4 years old at a Christmas party at my stepdad's sister's house. We always called her my aunt, so just at my aunt's house. Just to explain it, my aunt, we were close to them for my aunt and uncle. We were close to them for about 4 years, and then we lost contact after a while. And then after I went into foster care, the children's services contacted all family members, including them, to see if they would be willing to take any of the 7 kids in. And they did take in my younger sister, and she was with them for a while, and they ended up taking in me and my other sister too. My younger sister did end up moving out just because of some conflicts going on, but me and my older sister, we were adopted, and we were adopted in 2022, and it is just that shows that in my past I had connections with them, but I never would have thought they would become my parents one day. And then my second item, which I don't currently have, is a stuffed animal from my dad on Valentine's Day. It's from my adoptive dad on Valentine's Day. It's just a little dinosaur, and this means a lot to me because um he got it for me on Valentine's Day, and I had never really gotten anything other than like little gifts at school on Valentine's Day. And then also about a year later on Valentine's Day, me and my older sister were adopted. So even though he didn't know it at the time, he was getting like a kind of like pre-adoption gift because it kind of marks the anniversary a little bit. And then on our adoption day, he got me another stuffed animal and a bouquet of flowers. So those items really do mean a lot to me. Is there anything that means a lot to you, Addie, that you'd like to show for show and tell?
Yeah, so like you, I also have an item that I don't have, and that would probably be my brown blanket. And fun fact, I wrote my college application on my brown blanket, and sort of the travels and just kind of bouncing from home to home and how that kind of relates to my identity. So I can definitely relate to Alex about those kind of sentimental items that we kind of don't have, but still mean a lot to us. They're out there somewhere in the world. But today I have pair of hiking shoes because I'm a hiker by day and I'm a partier by night. No, I'm kidding. But these two really mean a lot. I'm not a big shoe person, but I think it definitely tells the story of like who I am and just how like different footwear makes me feel differently. Like when I put on these shoes, I'm like, ooh, I feel special. I feel amazing. I feel beautiful. When I put on these shoes, I'm like, I'm ready to do this. Like let's go. So I think like I don't know when you kind of step into the shoes of who you want to be. I think it's really important to step into it, with confidence and with one step at a time. So that's my item. Would Perry, would you like to go next?
Yes. Um, my item right here it's an old camera. It's a DVD camcorder. Um, it's very chic. And I love it so much because it is kind of a statement of my identity. And also the things that I remember being joyous, I love, I'm a daydreamer and I think a lot and I remember things I, remember bad or good, but the camera is linked to those good memories. Um, and it takes me to a familiar place, in my heart that, maybe I don't really have anymore. Um, but it just sits on my desk as a reminder of really nice things, that there is nice stuff, but or nice memories, or I have been through nice things. Um, and yeah.
So like Alex and Addie, I only have one item, but I'm not gonna show it because it's a piano, and the space surrounding it is a tad bit messy. But for me, music has always been something that's been held very dear to me. From my first foster placement to where I've been now. Like as a kid, I was that kid that was like, I'm gonna be a rock star. Or like I remember on the Saturday mornings, I was going downstairs and I was playing the grand piano that they had in their living room. And just throughout different stages of my life, when I was going through difficulties in my teenage years or with my adoptive family, I turned to music, like whether it be creating songs or just singing. Like I'd be outside doing my chores and you just hear some random girl singing. Um, to really, uh, I think around 2022 is when I really started to hone in and translate what I was feeling to music. So it's always been an outlet, always been an escape, and uh, I've always just kind of had that keyboard with me from like my first foster placement. It was a grand piano, and then when I got adopted by my family, I got my first keyboard actually from a thrift store, and it worked like anything else. And I kept it for like 4 or 5 years, and then when I went back into the system, I ended up getting a keyboard for Christmas. So it's just kind of that representation of the journey that life has taken me. And I think for a while I struggled with having a constant, whether it be people or things. I just could never find a constant. I was always looking at my life and being like, well, who's been here throughout all my life? Who's done this? And when I look back, I think that honestly, music has just been the constant throughout my life.
Honestly, those style items were very moving, very, very inspirational because it really does show the progress in our life and how one object or one thing can shape our entire identity. And to really go into that, I want to just ask a couple of questions. Because if you're thinking about it, if you could go back in time, where would you go and who would you want to be with? For me, it's definitely something that is kind of a hard topic for me because I honestly wouldn't want to go back. Right now, I am at my safest and most comfortable that I have been in my entire life. So for my answer, I want to stay here. I want to stay here with my people that I've grown to learn and be comfortable with.
I can definitely see that kind of perspective. It's like when you've gone through something, it's throughout your whole life and you've had that constant state of chaos or uncertainty. But for me, I would probably go back to that age group of like 7 to 13, and I would go back and I had my childhood best friend. And I think that was my first genuine relationship with somebody, like genuine true form of love that I felt because it was the things of like when I was going through things that she didn't quite understand, she was always there. Or like I don't know, the silly things you do when you're kids and it's like your friend brings you a snack, but I always ate faster than her, so instead of it being half and half, it ended up being like a fourth and three-fourths. And it was the little things like that to just like every single moment being spent together. So that's who I would go back into my time with. And I think that I would also go back to explain to her why I made certain decisions because she didn't fully understand why I left certain situations. And in turn, it hurt her because she didn't understand. So, yeah.
For me, I would say, I would actually go back to probably 2 years ago, when I was 18 and I flew across the country and just decided to start college in a new environment, and I would go back because kind of like what you were saying, Eve, like, it was kind of like the first time I kind of felt like I made genuine connections with people, and I had no idea who they were, and I think that was the best part because I felt like it was kind of like a start over a little bit, like, I didn't have to hold on to my identity as, like, a student in high school or working or even a sister or I don't know. I felt that at that time in my life, like it was just every day was just an adventure. And I think every day can still be an adventure, but I think that nothing will replace that time. And I think that, it's kind of sad to be like, oh man, I really wish I could get that back. I really wish I can like go back and just be right there. But I think the more that I like dwell on the past, the more um like life just keeps going and I'm just like, well, I'm still here, And so I would say I would probably go back to my 18-year-old self when I was just a young little person, not even an adult. So I would say that hopefully that's probably in your paths as well. Like once you become out of high school, like there's so much to look forward to, and I'm really excited for you all.
Thank you.
Honestly, all of the sharing was very nice and it was very amazing to learn more about you guys. And I do want to lead this into another question that is a bit more deep and it does touch on our emotions, but do we fully understand our trauma? Or is it meant to be crystal clear? Or is it meant to not be understood fully and picked apart? And for me, I don't think that anyone will be able to fully understand their trauma, but I think that we should be able to heal and process through it all without without unlocking like a Pandora's box of things that we never would want to get into. And also, nobody will be able to understand their trauma because they're not going to be able to get into the minds of the people who induce some of their trauma. And trying to fight and fight to understand their trauma will just end up hurting more. So I believe that we should keep it a little bit of a lockbox, but not all the way because we do need to heal.
I think that's a really like great way to put it. Um, for me, the way I would approach that question is what part of the trauma are you trying to understand? Are you trying to understand why it happened to you, or are you trying to understand the effects that it had on you and how to move forward from it? So I think the aspect of, why did this person do this to me or why did this trauma happen to me? I definitely think that you're never going to know. So again, not necessarily keeping it completely closed and never touching on it, but not stressing yourself out. But I think the other aspects of trauma can be can be understood. I don't think that it'll ever be crystal clear, but I think you can um, find out how to move forward from it, find out how it affected you, and things of that nature. And for me, I tend when going through trauma, I tended to be the person that it would happen, and then as a way to survive in the environment that I was in, I would just completely forget it. Like, I would just, like, push it down and it'd be like especially when you're living in a situation with that person, in order to survive, you adapt to certain things that you just wouldn't want to do in everyday life. Um, so I think that those kind of habits lead into when you're in a safe environment, so I think that understanding some of that trauma is important and trying to really break it down is important. So, yeah.
I do want to just real quick touch on Eve's point of like forgetting all of your trauma because that is something that I go through and I know a lot of people who went through it as they were trying, as they were in a situation where they weren't able to heal. So I definitely just want to like share that I also experienced that.
I really liked what Eve said about experiencing trauma. I just want to make a point based off of what she said, because at the aftermath of trauma, she mentioned, and when you think about it, the aftermath, you think, oh, I want to start healing. But for me, um, you kind of just have to realize once you're in a new situation what you're left with, what you don't have to do anymore, um, and put that into perspective. Like, um, I guess I struggle with having a figure, just like an adult, like a trusted adult, um, just in general, because I don't really have that after going through the system. Some adults have failed us, and it's, I struggle with finding an adult that I feel support from. And so, putting in perspective the new environment you're in is important, because I think after the trauma has happened, um, is the most formative experience, learning what you don't have anymore, learning yourself instead of just experiencing. It's so formative. And at least for me, being in a new environment where I feel, safe, um, it's it's like blossoming, it's like blooming. Whereas in that other environment, you were kind of just suffocating. Um, but I hope that wasn't too off topic.
Yeah. Um, to kind of add what you're saying, like your environment definitely impacts the way you tell your trauma. I think that maybe in our heads we think of this kind of this storyline, we kind of recall that memory. But I think in different phases of our lives, that how we tell that story and how it kind of plays into our heads changes. And I know that sounds weird, like that event happened to me. Like there's nothing that changed. The past doesn't change, but I think the past does change depending on the story that you tell it, and that perspective changes when you change. Not saying you have to change, or not saying that, that person or that situation that happened to you was the best thing of your life, I would love to go back there and just throw some popcorn in my mouth and watch a movie, but I'm just saying that, I think going really, I don't know, I feel like trauma has this kind of weight on it that it kind of feels like I can't breathe. Like, it feels like I'm kind of suffocating, kind of like you were saying, Perry, where it's like trauma. You feel like it's kind of like a chain, like you're dragging it like along, and you're like, when can I just be free from this? When do I actually feel like I can just be me, not a prisoner to this past that I feel like I'm carrying? And I'm gonna be honest, I have no solution for you because I feel like I also kind of am in that. It kind of is like, I don't know if you've heard of like the 5 stages of grief, where it's like, there's like depression, there's um, denial, anger, bargaining, and acceptance. And you're like, okay, if I just step one, all right, let's tackle this. Let's tackle anger. Let's tackle depression today. Like, there's no like linear line to this healing journey. And I also think that um, it wasn't our purpose to heal from our past. I don't think it was our purpose to constantly search healing and constantly feel like we are not where we're supposed to be. Even if we do have future goals and we still have future ambitions, if you think about it, would you want to know how your life ended up? Would you want to know if you were going to be successful in the end? Would it change your decision now? And my professor told me that today, and it still makes me think about that because I'm like, huh, like, am I making choices because, why am I making these choices in my life? And like, also like, why don't I feel like I'm successful now? Why do I have to wait for this explosionary, transformative experience to transform me, and like I'm gonna be so much better? Like, I think really, kind of confronting our past is definitely not like there's no rule book. Like everyone handles it so differently, and to be here and say like this is how you do it. Like it's kind of rude almost because I think just everyone has their own story, and I think everyone can change the way they share that story. If you're coming from a perspective like, for instance, when I was in care, I was very ashamed to be around my mom, and I was very ashamed to tell anybody about what was happening at home, and I didn't blame her, but I also just didn't like her. Like, I'm just gonna be honest. I was like, "I don't wanna go back home, like, I wanna do this on my own. I wanna be independent, I'm gonna have my own apartment, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that." And then, I came around and I was like, "Wait, my mom isn't terrible." Like, she actually was struggling, and I got to know, like, my mom, like, was raising herself and her brother, when she was young, and, she told me that, she had to, like, wash her clothes by hand and that her mom was not around and her dad was not around, and it just made me feel, like, more compassionate when I was able to share it with her and also when she was able to open up to me. So I really think, our trauma is not meant to be, like, kind of held with ourselves. It really is to be shared, and it doesn't have to be that physical person, but maybe it could just be, like, in our rooms or in a place where we feel safe and we could just talk out loud. Like, sometimes I'll sit in there, I'll be like, "Grandpa," like, I know it sounds weird, but, like, my grandpa passed away, and I'll just be like, I really miss you, and, like, I just like, this is really hard, and I know what you would do, like, you would hug me and you would tell me it was alright, but you're not here anymore, and so I also have to kinda do that myself, so, it's not easy, but I think that when we grow up, like not grow up, but I guess when we just kind of live life and naturally we accumulate more knowledge without even knowing it, It's not that we're constantly reading books about healing and trauma. Maybe that is something we do, but I think over time we kind of just learn like how to navigate this road, or maybe we just create our own path. Like we don't follow anybody else's trail. Maybe we're just all creating our own paths from what we're experiencing, so, yeah.
I kind of before we plateau to the next question, I kind of wanted to touch on like the acceptance of trauma, and I think again a lot of people focus on that healing journey, but like you said, maybe we're not meant to heal. But I think not even but I kind of want to add on to that. Um is like the more you accept that yes, trauma is absolutely heartbreaking. Like I wouldn't be who I am without it today. So the more that you accept that, yes, this is such a heartbreaking thing, I feel like I'm not explaining this in the way that I'm trying. Like, I'm not even trying to come across as insensitive. I think, but for me personally, the biggest way of working through my trauma and trying to understand it is like ultimately, I don't know who I would be without the things that made me who I am today. And I don't know who I would be without the journey that my life has taken me. And so, and I also don't think that like healing necessarily means forgetting. I think healing is this happened, this is what it did to me, and this is how I'm going to grow from it. But like this is a part of me, and that's okay. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely see healing as something that you need to accept and not exactly like trauma isn't something you need to get over. It's something you need to accept and work through, but no one, you're not gonna ever get over your trauma. But this does lead into our next question. Who were you before you heard the word trauma or healing? So like to expand on that, like who were you as a person before you understood that you were going through something? Before you understood that it was something that needed to be healed. For me, the phrase ignorance is bliss comes to mind because it really explains that as a child, I didn't understand that the things that were happening to me were bad things. I didn't understand that they were things that should not happen to a child. So I lived just a blissful mindset. I always looked at the world in rose-colored glasses, and it was definitely something. It was sort of a heartbreak when I found out that I was not in a safe situation. And when I was first put into care, they know I was young. I was 7, so they never explained to me everything that had gone on because they they never really explained why it was bad. They thought I would be too young to understand it. So it led me to be confused and hurt. So when I found out that it was a traumatic experience and all of that, it was very hard to accept because I had never understood. I never even heard of trauma. But when I did fully accept that I had gone through something, I had been going through something, and I continued to be going through something, even when I learned what trauma was, healing was the hardest part of it. Because it was still hard to accept, even though I knew I had to. So, as healing is acceptance, in my opinion, I healing was a hard thing, but eventually I got to the point where I was mature enough and I understood enough that I could truly want to heal and understand that I needed to heal to be a functioning member of society who actually was able to provide like good things to the world instead of just being someone who never healed.
I think that's a great point about like feeling the need to work through it for the sake of like wanting to be able to like live your own life. I think that that's definitely a huge part of trauma. I feel like because it's almost at times like you feel that obligation. Um, but for me, I guess I don't really know who I was before trauma completely because I was introduced to the system as a newborn. Like my mother was like I was a crack baby. I don't know how else to put it. So the system was always involved in my life. I was always going through things, but I I can relate to the ignorance is bliss because at the period of time that I was with my adoptive family, it was still a very unsafe and difficult environment, but I was so hyper focused on the trauma that I had already been through that I just refused to believe that what was happening to me then was still trauma, or I just kind of knew it was and I blocked it out. I'm like, you know what? We're just going to focus on healing from that. Um, so I guess I don't necessarily know who I was before trauma, but I can definitely understand once you're out of there and you have that realization like, oh crap, this is a lot more extreme than I realized or allowed myself to realize, that realization really does hit on a different like level.
I would say for me, so I entered the system later, probably around 13. And it's funny because I think I had a actually pretty good childhood. I think that um, you know, it was really just me, my mom, and my siblings. But I think for me, like that word trauma, I had not heard until I entered the system and until my social worker, started talking to me about what was going on at home. Because I had speculated that my mom was, abusing for my whole life pretty much. I would always talk with my sister and be like, Layla, like, I think mom is doing this. And she'd be like, no, no, no. So I think a lot of it was denial a little bit. Um, but I think once it was official, it kind of was like, wow, I was right. Yeah, I was right. But I was like, oh, I was right. Almost like I didn't want to be right. I didn't want this to be true, but I knew it was true, but I didn't want it to be true. And I think that kind of relates to my kind of relationship with trauma. It's like, uh, half of the time I'm like, you know what? this didn't really happen to me, you know? Like, it's okay. I grew from this. I'm a better person now. But I think that only left me kind of like, um, kind of when you do like something halfway, you just kind of stuff it with something just to kind of so you can't see it anymore. Like maybe you stuff it under your bed, you stuff something under your bed, but eventually like, you start seeing things, you're like, "Oh, I can't stuff anymore. I have to like now I have to take more time out of my day to clean it up." And I think hadn't I maybe just put it in the right place that I thought maybe it would be, maybe it wouldn't take so long maybe to just kind of unpack it. But I think long story short, honestly, I was pretty happy kid. Um, I would play outside. I slept on the floor, but to be honest, like being around my family, like it didn't make it feel like a traumatic event. I think the most traumatic was being alone, but having everything. Like when I went to live with my foster mom or yeah, like I remember feeling so alone. Even though I had things, right? Like I had a bed for the first time, but I think for me it was like that feeling like loneliness and kind of having to sit with yourself in that and kind of yeah, so I would say I was happy because I was with people and people who I loved and people who I trusted.
Um,
I
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Um, this question. I think before I heard the word trauma or healing, um, I was in a state of survival mode, so I wasn't really paying attention to anything that happened to me. I just, I'm like, I'm hungry. I need to find food. I wonder where I'm sleeping tonight, it was kind of like a free for all. Um, I was around and me and my family were always around each other, but it was kind of we were all fending for our own in a way, just because of the dynamic that was there. And coming into the system, um, I also came in around 11 or 12, and at the time, that was COVID. So I just felt super stunted after coming into the system after COVID because it seemed like everyone else around me was like I felt primitive. I had never heard this word. I never really understood it. It just felt like everyone had this understanding of the word and how to treat it and how what it means referring when you refer to people with trauma. Um, but after, I mean, it kind of didn't phase me hearing the word because in the system, it was still kind of a survival mode for me. And I didn't have any time to focus on thinking about things that I was going through or had been through, at least constructively. Um, but I think the word trauma and healing for me now, maybe it's never really grown on me actually. um, I suppose I just have my own way of um, going about healing. So that's still kind of a funny word to me.
Yeah,
Um,
that's definitely a great point, Mary, because like I can't even pinpoint an exact moment where I understood the words trauma and healing, but I know that even in current therapy, when my therapist will say, what is like a traumatic moment that you remembered when your PTSD was triggered? I'm like, are you sure? So it's definitely a weird word for me still. But just to wrap this whole questionnaire and the show and tell up, I want to make the point of our our past, everything that influences our identity, like it really does influence our future. As Eve said, we are not who we are today without our trauma, without our past. So as we really think about our trauma and start thinking about the healing process, or if we're in the healing process, we can, because we're all older, we can start like really trying to pinpoint what we want to do with our future. There's nothing that you can do, like possibly do, to understand fully what your future is going to be. But we can start like understanding what we might want it to be and try to move towards that. So, just as a finishing point, I know this episode was very deep. It got into some harder subjects, but I believe that if all of you listeners really think about it, you may be you may be able to understand some more things about yourself. So thank you all for listening. I'm Alex, signing out.